even at the funeral service, there were hundreds of people there, and I mean, I've never seen so many people at a funeral. Normally, I mean, my wife and I had been to a service a couple of weeks earlier for someone else, and there was the standard maybe 20 people there. But to see 200 or 300 people, pretty much every seat taken, that really showed how many lives he affected internationally, not just locally. I mean, yes, he did reach out to people in his neighborhood, in his church, his community, in many different ways, but he had friends all over the world, and that was truly incredible for somebody who was not quite 48 years old, just 3 days away from turning 48.
When you can, you have a choice between saying something in a complex way or saying something in a simple, understandable way. Mike always chose the simple, understandable way. And there were some pretty complex topics. Mike was a friend. He showed you that he cared. It's rare. It's a good thing.
We went from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. And at 12 o'clock every day, we went across the hall and had a lunch with Mike. So basically, we spent the entire day with Mike. And my experience was he went through just about every SEO issue you could think of, on page, off page, everything else. And how he started the course was the best part. He said, if there is a question about SEO that you want answered, I will be able to give you the answer. And I threw hundreds of questions at him over that 5-day period, because at that point I'd been doing SEO for about 5 years, and he literally answered every one of them. And it was just a fascinating experience. It's kind of like a can I stump Mike type of thing, and I couldn't.
Michael, he had no ego that I ever discerned. He had he was just like your next door neighbor. He could sit down and he could just talk to you on any level. And then, of course, if he was sitting with a buddy who happened to be a mathematician, sometimes I got in on those conversations because I got to know some of his friends, and they'd start talking about mathematics, and it'd just go right over my head because they'd get talking about the timing and the trajectory of these traffic spikes, and they'd be so excited about all this math stuff. I'd worked on a page on our website and basically just made the changes he said to make, pick some words out of each color and put them on the page so that it reads well. And then I forgot about it, and he had come to, the next session was going to be at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and I was, freaking out because this page that I had worked on with his tool was, it wasn't really optimized. I wasn't trying to optimize it, but it was an articles page, and it came out of oblivion right to the very top, over 40 million competing results. And I've got to find out what's going on with this page. I'm embarrassed to say I forgot that was the test page that I'd used on Michael's tool. So when he looked at it, he's probably the only one that could see what was going on. And he said, well, I know what you're doing. So I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, that was the page that we tested this thing on originally. And it was just rocking and rolling. As other students would try this tool out, they got similar results, and they were just thrilled with the idea that you could use things like semantics and contextual language, secondary supporting words, to really flesh out an article and have it sing in the search results. And, of course, the great thing about Michael Marshall, the thing I'll always remember about him is, his tools were fabulous, okay? He always was coming up with some kind of new tool. But at the workshop, his policy was he'd show you the tool and show you how it could go out and do all the grunt work for you. But one of the things he insisted on was he would show you how to do the work manually, so you didn't even need the tool. And, of course, the students loved that. Of course, I'm no mathematician, and Michael's favorite expression was, math is your friend. And he says, he used to say to me, math is your friend. Now, if math is not your friend, go out and find a friend that knows math. And I thought I couldn't have a better friend that knows math. And he was a problem solver. He was, at the same time, being an expert programmer. I mean, I've had other friends that are excellent programmers. They, read digital language the same as you and I would read words. But Michael had something else even further on that edge. It was highly, highly creative. He was extremely creative. I mean, he could create entire three-dimensional worlds, and he had incredible case studies where he had, people seemed to be, really competing. They were in the top 14 results, and they couldn't get any further. And with a little bit of his magic, he worked on those pages, and of course, he got them right up into the top result.
He loved questions, any and all questions. Nobody ever stumped him, as far as I heard or saw. He always knew the answer. And again, he'd be very humble about it. He wouldn't show off. He just knew the answer. His wife, if she had a question about an obscure verse from the Bible, could be from any place in the Bible, would go to him, and he would say, "Oh, here," and he would spend 15 minutes answering the question, because he had already studied the Bible from cover to cover. He knew so much, and she was so thankful that she could count on him to explain so many things to her, having acted as if he had been studying it for an hour before she even came to him with the question.
He worked hard, constantly worked hard. He loved his wife. He loved his children. He spent time with me and some other guys. He worked in his office doing coding and doing his SEO for hours and hours and hours, coming up with new ideas. He loved it. When people told him, "You can't do that, that's impossible," well, he did the impossible. There were occasions when he found ways to do things that were supposedly not possible. He just kept using his mind to its fullest extent, and it was just really incredible. So it was just a man who he had a great sense of oh boy, and he loved so many different topics, and he excelled in so many things. He was like a team of people in one body, and that was actually much the conclusion of a company that our small company considered partnering up with a number of years ago. That company had tried to develop an SEO product very similar to what Mike had done all by himself. They had a team of people trying to work on that product, and they gave up on it. They just said, "We can't do this, it's too hard." And yet he did it just through excelling in so many different areas, and through perseverance and working late into the night every night. So an incredible guy.
Mike was able to kind of fathom, parse out what search engines were doing. He, in his earlier days, actually wrote a search engine himself to get the understandings of what the concepts were that made them run. That, combined with his experience in mathematics and linguistics, was able to create an algorithm that basically sorted through everything that Google was doing. So when you ran a search for a certain term or key phrase, rather than him trying to chase and guess offices of what search engine is doing, his algorithm just kind of studied to see what the search engine spit back. So if he put in a phrase, then he would enter that in. His tool would kind of go into it and look at things. I think he looked at nearly 200 metric. There's just so many things, title tag, body count, the data, all kinds of information, and then content on the page. So by letting Google spit back the information and then analyzing it through what's known as multivariate analysis, he was able to distill and find out, okay, Google says these sites are the best, and from his tool he was able to deduce what those facts were that made them best, and that was unique. And another tool that he had created that was also very, very innovative, and you hear more and more about it, it's called latent indexing. He basically looked at content on a page and was able to analyze it through linguistic methods and also what Google was saying related terms. By making a comparison, you could analyze any page or any piece of content based on a key phrase, determine, oh, here are the phrases that most go with this that should be in here that you don't have in here. So again, what you would do, and this is a common practice, is you want to write for the human first, but then go back and look to see if you can edit and sprinkle in things that tool suggested would be excellent terms that will build your credibility or likelihood to be found in search.
Google and the other major search engines in the past would occasionally introduce white papers that would talk about what their technology was actually doing. But these white papers were very, very mathematical, and the average person would look at them and not appreciate what was actually going on in all that math. But Mike would actually look at those white papers when they were available. Now they can't be found anywhere. And he found out exactly what Google in particular was doing, how its search engine was actually functioning. And he also looked at patents that Google had acquired, and he looked at other things that Google was doing. And he figured out a way to either mimic or really understand how Google was working. And of course, nobody can understand it perfectly because it's just so complex. But he found a way to approximate what was going on, and he realized that SEO is not just simply having 2 to 4% of your content having a certain key phrase in it, having your meta keywords in a certain place. He realized that was old technology. Google doesn't work that way anymore. And he realized that Google was looking at content, and Google was doing other things in certain ways, and so he began to think very differently from everyone else. And some people, of course, looked at what he was doing and said, "Oh, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about." But he proved by his results that he did understand Google really well. I remember one time he was speaking to an audience. I think it was maybe Las Vegas, and he spoke for an hour or so. And somebody in the audience raised his hand and kind of said, "Well, you don't know what you're talking about. How do you know you're right? Do you have any way of knowing what you're right? Do you have any way of knowing if you're right?" And Mike said, "Well, of course I can't know if I'm right, but it would be a strange coincidence that my tools seem to be working quite well. That they seem to be approximating Google to the point where my customers are getting much better traffic for all their key phrases. So if that is just a coincidence, I'll take that over guessing any day."
Mike was able to kind of fathom, parse out what search engines were doing. He, in his earlier days, actually wrote a search engine himself to get the understandings of what the concepts were that made them run. That, combined with his experience in mathematics and linguistics, was able to create an algorithm that basically sorted through everything that Google was doing. So when you ran a search for a certain term or key phrase, rather than him trying to chase and guess offices of what search engine is doing, his algorithm just kind of studied to see what the search engine spit back. So if he put in a phrase, then he would enter that in. His tool would kind of go into it and look at things. I think he looked at nearly 200 metric. There's just so many things, title tag, body count, the data, all kinds of information, and then content on the page. So by letting Google spit back the information and then analyzing it through what's known as multivariate analysis, he was able to distill and find out, okay, Google says these sites are the best, and from his tool he was able to deduce what those facts were that made them best, and that was unique. And another tool that he had created that was also very, very innovative, and you hear more and more about it, it's called logarithmic indexing. He basically looked at content on a page and was able to analyze it through linguistic methods and also what Google was saying related terms. By making a comparison, you could analyze any page or any piece of content based on a key phrase, determine, oh, here are the phrases that most go with this that should be in here that you don't have in here. So again, what you would do, and this is a common practice, is you want to write for the human first, but then go back and look to see if you can edit and sprinkle in things that tool suggested. Would be excellent terms that will build your credibility or likelihood to be found in search.
When you have a choice between saying something in a complex way or saying something in a simple, understandable way, Mike always chose the simple, understandable way. And there were some pretty complex topics. Mike was a friend. He showed you that he cared. It's rare. It's a good thing.